Hey, if you're seeing this, you are probably exhausted right now. And I'm not talking about just physically exhausted or mentally exhausted. I'm talking existentially exhausted. Some of you may think of it as existential crisis, but I tend to not use the word crisis because it has such a disempowering energy to it. Exhaustion is more relatable. It's more practical. It's often a way for you to see within the crises, whether it be medical crises, mental, or whatever have you. Exhaustion is at the core of how we've been showing up in the world that we live in right now. My exhaustion isn't like most people. And if you're watching this, then you might can relate to this kind of exhaustion as well. That's sort of the nature of what I'm going to talk about here. What's exhausting for me, outside of the collective distorted perception of things, is the refusal to name the distortion and commit to adjusting it. And the exhaustion is having to speak in paradox to a world that is addicted to binaries. And in defending binary thinking, many people will try to squeeze the paradox into the binary rather than folding the binary into the paradox. Now, some of you don't even know what a paradox is. I'll tell you what it is. A paradox is when multiple things are true at the same time, multiple things exist at the same time. And this brings in another question. Well, if multiple things are true at the same time, then what is true? What matters the most here? I'll tell you what matters the most. What matters the most within a paradox is what you are giving most of your attention to, what you are giving your most active focus to. And in the society where everything is grabbing your attention almost at once, it's hard for you to sit still and actually be intentional about where your focus is being drawn to. Sit with that, because once you are clear with where your focus is going, then you can be more intentional about what you focus more on, which means you begin to be more intentional about the binary. In other words, my point isn't to cancel out binary thinking. My point is to put the binary thinking into paradoxical thinking. The binary is a necessary human asset, but it is not the arc of the human story. Binaries are tools. They measure the highest and the lowest probability of what works and what doesn't work. When the binary becomes the arc of the human story, there is this demand for absolutes and certainties. But the paradox is screaming, the only thing that is certain on this planet is uncertainty. The only thing that is absolute on this planet is probability. Take human emotion, for example. It is literally energy in motion. But the institutions that govern our way of life here can't seem to leave raw energy alone. For example, religion tries to package it into deity concepts and call it spirit, and then use constructed entities like God, Buddha, Muhammad. Those are binaries. But again, we're not canceling out the binaries. And if you don't lean toward religion, the same happens in science, where science dissects consciousness into different levels, 3D, 4D, 5D, 6D, 7D, and so on. And you're literally segregating consciousness from the wholeness of it all. And as a result, we get handed these binary stories, and in the process, we forget and we overlook the most tangible, biggest human paradox of all: the physical body. The nervous system feels, but the mind is so clogged with binary stories that contradict the other that the nervous system can't fully feel, and the emotions can't flow freely. And the blocks that this causes is a tax that we all have to pay because the collective world is trying to force a paradox into binaries that they weren't meant to fit in for the long haul. And then you wonder why there's this surge in neurodivergent diagnoses. The collective nervous system has outgrown these enforced binaries, and it needs to stretch into something different. And so you might be asking, well, what is it? What are we stretching into? That's for you to explore. Go freestyle, go experiment, create, and see what mysteries come into form for you. Pay attention to who's attracting themselves into your space and whose space you are attracting yourself into. And this is where it gets tricky, because the law of attraction, or the psychology of attraction, is very tricky when the field is distorted. This grid that we call our planet is programmed to extract whatever moves, whatever flows. It doesn't matter if it's desire, if it's attention, whether it's energy, or even if it's hope. If it moves, it can be taken. But here's the paradox. You still have to move in order to rewire the programming. You know, there was a time in our human history, somewhere in our existence, where alignment wasn't hijacked, packaged, and then sold back to us for a profit, and then labeled as laws. These laws of the universe were once processes, fluid, alive, that evolve whenever we evolve. But once they were branded as rigid courtroom decrees, they stopped expanding. They became commandments that you could break, rules that you could weaponize, and products you could sell. Catch this. And so they were stunted. For example, the law of attraction became this vending machine for materialistic desire. The law of reciprocity became this ledger of manipulation. The balance became imbalance, which means matching attraction became mismatched attraction. Matching reciprocity became mismatched reciprocity, and so on and so forth. In other words, it takes more than it gives, and it teaches us to do the same thing. And so the only way out of this is through movement, intentional conscious movement, and not intentional in the sense that you are being precise about controlling and consuming and manipulating. That's one way to do it. But if you have a non-manipulative intention, then the intention is to be for the good of all and the harm of none. And then this puts you into a paradox within a paradox, because oftentimes when it comes to intentional movement, you got to know when not to move. Consciously and intentionally disengaging from the manipulation and doing nothing. Because nothing is something. Nothing is movement. You are doing no thing. You are allowing yourself to force quit, to have a system reset, to shut down. And in that conscious stillness, you notice what your body is doing naturally and what your body is being forced to do. Because almost everything that is imbalanced is either being forced, it's being pressured, it's being bullied in some way, shape, or form. But the truth here is you will get tired. You will get exhausted. But exhaustion isn't the end-all be-all of this process. Exhaustion is simply part of the process. It's literally your body and your nervous system telling you that you are moving in a way that needs to change, and you got to slow down, you got to stop, you got to pay attention in order to go with where it's being changed to. And rest, self-care, self-maintenance is a part of this process. It's a part of the freestyling. It's a part of the creativity, so that you can get better at moving consciously but differently. You can get better at being still more consciously, and refuse the motions that keep the manipulation in the grid fed, while relearning the motions that keep the laws alive. Because again, the laws weren't meant to be laws in the first place. They were meant to be processes, and they still can be, without you collapsing into the limits or abandoning yourself in the process. Hold what I'm saying to your heart. Okay? And in the meantime, in between time, be kind to your mind and be gentle with your heart, your nervous system, and your body. And if you've enjoyed or felt uplifted or inspired in any way from this message, please subscribe, please like, comment, and share the message. This allows more people to see it and to take it in and reflect, because reflection matters. Taking the pause matters, and then moving forward consciously matters a lot. All right? So until next time, take care.